All right, so the title of today's explainer is, well, it's a real head-scratcher. The autocracy that calls itself a democracy. I mean, right away that sounds like a complete contradiction, doesn't it? It's a pretty wild claim, and we're going to spend the next few minutes unpacking exactly what's going on here.
And what's so interesting is that the author, a leader who goes by the name Xu, he totally gets it. He knows exactly how that title sounds. I mean, he says it himself. It reads like a riddle, one that makes most people just want to curse. He's basically saying, yeah, I know this sounds crazy, but stick with me.
So here's the core idea we're going to dig into. Xu isn't just defending his leadership style. He's making this absolutely extraordinary claim that his self-described autocratic rule, get this, isn't the opposite of democracy. He says it's actually a model for it. Yeah, it's a really challenging idea, so let's see how on earth he tries to build that case.
Okay, so to even begin to understand his point, we have to get our heads around this key concept he calls word appearances. Basically, he's arguing that words like autocracy and democracy, they're just labels. They're just the surface. He's asking us to suspend our gut reactions to these words and instead to look at the results, what's really going on underneath the label.
Right. So the first part of his argument is maybe not what you'd expect. He doesn't start by singing the praises of autocracy. No, he starts by going on the attack against traditional democracy. He's basically trying to poke holes in the system that, let's be honest, most of us just take for granted.
And he frames his whole critique around this one big question. He starts by setting the stage. He says, okay, what's the whole point of democracy anyway? Well, it's to create a society where everyone can live with joy, freedom, and well-being. Simple enough, right? But then he asks really bluntly, does it actually work?
And his answer is just as blunt, a flat-out no. He argues that for all its noble goals, democracy consistently fails to deliver on its own promises. And this is where it gets really interesting, because now we have to look at the evidence he uses to back up such a huge claim.
So he points to what he sees as these massive historical failures that were actually produced by democratic processes. He goes all the way back to ancient Athens and the jury that voted to execute Socrates. Then he jumps to the 20th century and Hitler's rise to power through the Weimar Republic's own elections. And then he brings it to the modern day, pointing to all the turmoil that he says came out of Brexit.
Let's zoom in on that Socrates example for a second, because for him, this is the perfect illustration of what he calls the tyranny of the majority. You had a democratic vote, 500 citizens, and 360 of them voted guilty. That vote led directly to the death sentence of one of the greatest thinkers in all of history. For Xu, that's not justice. That's a mob using the rules to overpower a minority.
And this really gets to the moral question at the heart of his whole critique. I mean, we can all agree that it's wrong for a small group to oppress and bully everyone else, right? But then he flips it. He asks, so why is it okay for a majority to oppress and bully a minority? It's a tough question.
Okay, so after tearing down democracy, or at least trying to, Xu presents his alternative, his solution. He calls it the Superman philosophy, and this is the absolute foundation of his entire system.
And here's the core principle. It's really all about radical responsibility. The idea is simple, actually. For any given thing, one person is responsible. Whoever is responsible gets to call all the shots. But, and this is the crucial part, whoever is responsible also has to bear all the consequences, whether they're good or bad.
And man, is he unapologetic about this. He does not pull any punches. Just listen to some of his personal mottos. He says things like, democracy is the aspiration of the mediocre. Wow. And he says he doesn't like to discuss or argue. It's basically, look, if you think I'm right, come with me. If you think you're right, then go do your own thing. It's about as take it or leave it as you can get. So you might be wondering, why is he so insistent on this specific autocratic system? Well, he gives two big reasons. First, he believes he has a unique vision. He claims he can see the path for humanity's future more clearly than pretty much anyone else. And second, he says he studied all these past utopian communities, like New Harmony, and he's come to the conclusion they all failed for one single reason. They were too democratic. So, okay, that's all the theory. But theory is one thing. How does this actually work out in the real world? Well, Xu points to his own community, which is called Life Chenyuan, as his Exhibit A, the proof that his model really works.
And the very first piece of evidence he offers up is just how long it's been around. His second home community has been operating for 18 years.
Now, in a world where so many of these kinds of communities fall apart after a year or two, he sees that longevity as a huge sign of stability and success. Next up, he talks about how happy the members are. He claims that a whopping 95% of the people in his community, he calls them Chanyuan Celestials, are willing to stay. For him, that's the only vote that matters. It's the ultimate vote of confidence in his leadership.
And then he rattles off this list of results that he's clearly very proud of. Things like basically no crime, no theft, no fraud, only one single physical fight in 18 years. He also makes a huge point that everyone has 100% freedom to leave whenever they want. He talks about the high quality of life, the beautiful environment, and the strict rules to protect women. And, to top it all off, he says he personally owns nothing, no assets at all. Everything belongs to the community.
So this is where we circle all the way back to that original mind-bending claim. How can all of this, an autocratic leader, no debating, how can that possibly add up to a model of democracy? Well, for him, it's all about redefining the goal.
It really boils down to this final, simple comparison. On one hand, you have the stated goal of democracy, right? To let everyone live with joy, happiness, freedom, and well-being. And on the other hand, you have Zuifeng claiming that his autocratic rule has achieved exactly that. He's basically saying, forget the labels, I'm getting the results that you only talk about. He's arguing that the result matters way more than the method.
And that leads him to his grand conclusion. He presents all those achievements we just talked about as simple facts. And his logic is, if his system achieves the goals of democracy, then his system, his autocracy, must be a model of democracy. It's an incredibly bold, direct, and very challenging final statement. But he doesn't just leave it at that. He ends with a direct challenge. To you, to me, to anyone who disagrees. He sincerely invites you to share with him a historical example of what you consider to be a true model of democracy, so that he can study it. And that's where we'll leave it, with his final, thought-provoking question, leaving it up to all of us to weigh the evidence and decide what we think.